Be my victim. I am the writing on the wall.
11 insane origin stories of mega horror villains. Origin stories are always intriguing, especially if the character is iconic. However, our usual attention is devoted to the origin stories of heroes. We're curious to know how Bruce Wayne becomes Batman, or how a radioactive spider bite makes Peter Parker Spiderman. Have you ever wondered about what made the worst villains the most horrifying monsters that they turned into? The genre has numerous deadly villains, and Hollywood does a great job when it comes to providing us with an exciting origin story for their characters. So in case you're curious about what made these intimidating villains into psychotic killers or ruthless assassins, this video will contain the answers. We have included some of the famously known horror villains and explain the source of their evil.
Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Your name, sir? John. With an H, without an H, doesn't matter.
We'll go John with an H this time.
Jigsaw, the Saw series. All horror fans have watched in sheer bewilderment as the Saw series took shape over the years. One of the key reasons behind the thrilling series thriving was the presence of an evil genius. The psychotic serial killer named John Kramer is known as Jigsaw because he cuts puzzle-shaped pieces of flesh from his victims who do not manage to survive. This ruthless monster, however, had a rather tragic past that shaped his murderous psyche. Saw 2 and Saw 4 provide a lot of information on his state of mind. He was a regular man who was very much in love with his wife, Jill. But tragedy struck when she had a miscarriage due to the reckless actions of a drug addict in rehab. This tragedy had a huge impact on John, who was also diagnosed with cancer. He tried to kill himself, but his failed suicide attempt made him into a cunning serial killer. His methods were terrifying, and he subjected the victims to unthinkable situations where they would have to pass through his deadly games or tests. This character appeared in all the Saw movies, and the creators, Leigh Whannell and James Wan, created a villain who would be remembered for times to come. Credit is also due to Tobin Bell, whose brilliant acting adds life to this maniac killer who wants people to be more grateful for their lives and puts them through severe struggles that either kill them or make them thankful for their existence. Candyman. Local legends and folklore are seldom true, but when they are, you better run for your life. At least that's what we've learned from the remarkable horror movie Candyman, that later spiraled into a couple of sequels. Clive Barker's creativity ensured that we encountered one of the most dangerous horror villains, Candyman, the immortal serial killer who is keen on keeping the stories and rumors of his legend alive. It's almost ironic that most horror villains have a tragic past that will make you sympathetic despite the horrors they unleash. The case of Candyman is no exception, and a legend suggests that Candyman was once an innocent painter who was hopelessly in love. His father was a slave who became wealthy after inventing a machine that could mass-produce shoes. He sent his son to the best schools in America, and the young man became an impressive painter. After being assigned to paint the beautiful daughter of a wealthy landowner, he fell in love with her. Upon learning that they were about to have a child out of wedlock, the girl's father was outraged and organized a mob to kill the young man in the most gruesome way that you can imagine. And his body was covered in honey to make the bees sting him to death. He was later burned on a pyre, and his ashes were scattered around the region. He then rose from his grave as a vengeful spirit, and anyone who dared to question his existence was in deep trouble. Honestly, can you even blame the poor soul for becoming a spiteful spirit?
We want the man who did this.
Pinhead, the Hellraiser series. The recurring antagonist in the Hellraiser series holds a special place in the long list of horror villains. Clive Barker, who is known for weaving his magic around horror stories, crafted Pinhead with the most sinister characteristics. Interestingly, Clive Barker never cared to assert the name Pinhead. and it was put together by the production and makeup crew guys. You probably know Pinhead as the leader of the Cenobites, demonic creatures that were once human. They can be summoned through the demonic puzzle called the Lament Configuration, and Pinhead is a highly intelligent and eloquent villain who has iron pins jabbed into his skull. In his early life, Pinhead was an English soldier named Captain Elliot Spencer, and he fought in World War I. When the war was over, his traumatic experiences and guilt made him experience a harrowing time. Slowly, he lost faith in humanity and God and was disillusioned about his purpose in life. He found the Lament Configuration during his travels to British India, and once he solved the puzzle, he was dragged into the labyrinth and transformed into the Cenobite. With time, he served the dark entity Leviathan as the new leader and slowly started to lose his last human attributes and memories. Much of his former life was explored in the movie Hellbound: Hellraiser 2, and it gave us interesting insights about his origin. Besides the fact that Pinhead was such an interesting character, Doug Bradley's effortless acting in the role made it stand out all the more. Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre series. It doesn't get much scarier than a cannibalistic serial killer who lives with his psycho family and kills unsuspecting victims for their meat. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which was the brainchild of Tobe Hooper, premised on this horrifying situation and soon became a huge hit that had to be converted into a full-blown franchise. Leatherface is not only the main villain, but also the mascot of this much-loved series. A movie made on a serial killer is always creepier when the reference is a real-life killer. As for Leatherface, the Wisconsin murderer named Ed Gein, who was also known to wear masks of human skin, was the inspiration. Wielding a sledgehammer and a chainsaw, Leatherface could strike fear in your heart even without a paranormal aspect to his character. The real-life killer was raised by a controlling mother, and his mental state worsened after her death, turning him into a monstrous killer. Leatherface is shown to be somewhat similar, and he's basically a big, brutal man with a child's psyche. In fact, Tobe Hooper made it clear that Leatherface only kills out of fear because he feels threatened by the victims. In most cases, he's completely reliant on the orders of his crazy family. Over the years, some amazing actors like Gunnar Hansen, Kane Hodder, and Bill Johnson portrayed this iconic character. Even today, his legacy is as fresh as ever, and there has rarely been a more ruthless villain in horror film industry. Pennywise. It. Stephen King has the knack for introducing some unique antagonists who can haunt your worst nightmare. Pennywise from the movie It would certainly make it up the charts. And for those who find clowns to be creepy, this is a shocker. It was made into a TV miniseries, and more recently, we had the film duo that was loved by the fans. The origin of Pennywise dates back several thousand years, when this malevolent entity spawned in the void of the Macroverse. In fact, the clown is one of the many faces of this shape-shifting evil force. It came to Earth to feed on the young and lived in the sewers of Derry. Every 27 years, it would awaken to prey on the children, and its cruel methods including feeding on their fears. One of the reasons that Pennywise dressed as a clown was because it made attracting children a lot easier. We never get to know the true identity of this creature, and we have no clue regarding its name, gender, or any other characteristics. A group of local Derry children who were typical social outcasts grouped together to get the better of this monster, and it came back 27 years later only to be defeated again. Don't feel bad for the sorry fate of Pennywise, because it tormented viewers back in the day with its vicious smile and atrocious killings. Brundlefly. The Fly. David Cronenberg has a long-standing relationship with body horror, and Brundlefly is a result of his twisted creativity. When the movie The Fly was released, people were shocked by the grotesque anti-villain protagonist. While we wouldn't exactly classify Brundlefly as evil, the appearance was certainly intimidating and scary. Brundlefly was Dr. Seth Brundle before a freak accident changed his life. He was a famous scientist and mastered molecular physics, trying his best to develop a teleportation system. Although he developed the telepods, he did not notice that a fly was stuck in there as well. The teleportation was successful, but the computers merged the two together. Slowly, Dr. Brundle started showing signs of transforming into a hybrid creature with many characteristics and qualities of a fly. There was growth in reflexes, superhuman strength, and increased awareness of his surroundings, attributes that you associate with a fly. However, as he started degenerating further, he never lost his concern for his ladylove or his would-be child. Audiences have shuddered in horror when in the climactic moments his rotten skin sheds, and a man-housefly hybrid monster is revealed. At the same time, you can't help feeling sorry for his state and sympathize with his constant attempt and hope of restoring normalcy. In the sequel of this movie, we see his son Martin grows up to build on his father's work. Even he transformed into a version of Brundlefly, but unlike his father, he was successful in curing himself. Jeff Goldblum delivered an enchanting performance that made the fans feel for the sufferings of the character. Michael Myers, the Halloween series. Ever since we have tasted the thrill and suspense on offer in the first Halloween movie, we can't seem to have enough of it. With a long line of sequels, this brainchild of John Carpenter has attained legendary status. Almost pronounced simultaneously with the movie is the remarkably evil serial killer Michael Myers. He has been the constant villain for the movies that followed, and the fear factor never reduced even with the repeated appearances. More often than not, it is a troubled childhood that gives rise to a serial killer. However, the character of Michael Myers has been shown to be pure evil. When he was 6 years old, he murdered his elder sister even without a discernible motive. After being sent to the sanitarium, the psychiatrist, Dr. Sam Loomis, realized that Michael was incorrigible. He just seemed to be an evil entity that had to be locked away. After 15 years, just before being locked up permanently, Michael managed to escape, and thus began the series of horrifying murders that haunted the Haddonfield region on Halloween. His killing spree continues, and the Halloween series has left an indelible mark in horror history. There are varying timelines for the character of Michael Myers, and even some conflicting stories regarding his origin. This one, however, seems to be the most fitting of them all. Let us know your views on this one in the comments section. The Thing. The Thing. In Antarctica, in the middle of nowhere, a group of American researchers encounter a deadly extraterrestrial form. This intriguing storyline was the brainchild of famed science fiction writer John W. Campbell Jr. and later adapted by John Carpenter. Before that, it was adopted way back in 1951, and later on in 2011, we saw another adaptation of the same story. The deadly life forms that assimilate and imitate other organisms have been referred to as the Thing. It all starts when the team discovers an alien spaceship that is estimated to have been there for 20 million years. When they thaw the insides of the spacecraft, they accidentally thaw the alien pilot, and it revives the creature. To their shock, the research team realizes that they are now facing a powerful entity that can assume the shape, memories, and personality of any living thing that it consumes to maintain the body mass. For much of the movie, the most exciting part is when you have to anticipate who among the crew is the Thing. The titular villain is a lethal creature that can launch long and sharp tentacles to grab the victims. It's also extremely intelligent and uses stealth and imitation to hide itself. While it's shown to be a deadly ambush predator, not much has been elaborated on its purpose.
And if I get him first...
Jason Voorhees, Friday the 13th series. The seemingly endless Friday the 13th series has entertained us from the 80s and continued on for over 2 decades. It was written by Victor Miller, and the initial intention was to cash in on the success of the movie Halloween. However, the unprecedented success paved the way for 12 slasher flicks, TV series, and even games based on the same name. This franchise would be handicapped without the powerful presence of Jason Voorhees, a name that sends a chill down our spine. This crazy serial killer had a rather tragic past. He was physically deformed, and his mother hid him away from others. He never went to school, and his mother was overprotective of him due to his deformities. When his mother worked as a cook in the camp at Crystal Lake, Jason was bullied by everyone around him. Eventually, his bullies pushed him into the lake, and everyone, including his mother, believed that he drowned. This caused her to unleash a series of violent attacks on the campers and camp counselors for vengeance for her son. The character first appears in the second movie, where we see a mass killer with a sack over his face. With his mother gone, he now roams around the region in a murderous rage, and his victims cannot escape his brute strength and machete. Pumpkinhead. During the VHS era, some terrific slasher horror films were made, and this list would be incomplete without the Pumpkinhead franchise. It was based on a creation by Ed Justice, and famed special effects expert, the late Stan Winston, handled the direction. The titular villain was a grotesque, demonic creature that could give you the chills from a mere look of it. The spiteful force is filled with vengeance and seeks to kill anything that comes in its way. Pumpkinhead is the central antagonist, and this powerful demon could be summoned by those who have been wronged. The purpose was to get revenge on the offenders, and the demon of vengeance fittingly served the vengeance. The process to summon Pumpkinhead is rather complicated, where one would have to dig up a corpse that would act as a vessel for the demon. However, the person who calls Pumpkinhead would be damned for all eternity and become one with the evil force. It all started when Ed Harley summoned Pumpkinhead, but with time, it became a punishment for him. He was unable to bear the horrors of this demon and shot himself to temporarily halt the force. However, the demon manifested itself again, and this time the victims are clueless about dealing with this invincible force. As for us, we were in awe of the unique appearance of Pumpkinhead. His long arms, lumpy head, thick legs, claws, and devilish tail made it one of the ugliest monsters back in the day. Freddy Krueger, A Nightmare on Elm Street. A Nightmare on Elm Street is regarded as a cult classic with 9 slasher flicks, a television show, comic books, and novels. For all of us who have tasted the brilliance of this franchise, Freddy Krueger is an unforgettable, notorious villain who haunted our thoughts. Wes Craven designed this character with great finesse, and his origin story is a rather interesting one. His biological mother, Amanda Krueger, was a nun at an asylum and was accidentally locked in a room with 100 psychotic men. After being repeatedly raped, she conceived Freddy Krueger, who spent his young days moving from one orphanage to another, where he was bullied and harassed by other kids. Eventually, he was adopted by Mr. Underwood, but there was no end to his trauma. Mr. Underwood was an abusive alcoholic, and Freddy had to endure unspeakable torture until he was a teenager and murdered his foster parent. After moving to Springwood, Ohio, he started taking out his anger on little children and became a secret child murderer. After he was arrested, the lack of evidence failed to get him convicted, but the angry parents of the town burned him alive. However, the horror had only just begun. 3 dream demons approached him before he died and made a deal so that he could return as an evil spirit to start his killing spree one more time. This time, Freddy was an immortal force that could murder people in their dreams and absorb their souls for more power. He would manipulate the dreams of the victim and reflect on their fears or simply kill them with his clawed glove.
And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.